If you want to learn the coaching cues for our baseline exercises here at Vigor Ground, especially for group training, so things like the deadlift, the kettlebell deadlift, the goblet squat, the push-up, the TRX row, the lunge, I'm going to cover them right now so you know exactly how to coach and cue to get the best performance, best experience for the client, and keep them safe and have them improve their results. All right, check this out. So I'm going to go over, this is an important factor, right? Like most of the time we're going to do baseline exercises, meaning in our group trainings, look, you're always going to hinge, right? Your deadlift, RDL, we're going to do a push-up, a vertical push, right? A horizontal push. We're going to do some type of row, TRX rows, a goblet squat, right? A lunge. And so those are kind of baselines that I want to cover. We might even go through like a hip thrust variation and the basic cues. Now, there's going to be kind of a list of things, and I want to kind of take you through what we're coaching. And of course, the toolbox of your cues should continue to expand. We can't, in this one video cover every cue possible, every analogy, every simile. But I'm going to go over some of them that you can use, and you can use over and over and over again, and they work extremely well. And we're going to start with the deadlift, especially the kettlebell deadlift. Now, for most of our general population in group settings, we're doing a lot of kettlebell deadlifts. We're also doing trap bar deadlifts in small group once it gets heavier. And a lot of the cues on a trap bar are going to be similar as they are here, with some exceptions, right? We don't do a lot of, I would say, straight barbell deadlifts. In semi-private, we do some, sumos as well. But this is the key ones, and that's what I want to go over. Okay, so with the kettlebell deadlift, right? Remember, just in deadlift in general, depending on, you could have a bar here, you could have a trap bar, but I got a kettlebell, right? Because it's a great way for groups to stay safe, learn, I would say, the form on this one, right? So first I'm gonna go, most of the time, if people are very extended, right? No matter what, I'm gonna say, soften up the knees. Because if somebody has locked out legs and they're very arched and they start going into the deadlift, they're gonna go into their low back, right? You can see this, right? So if I lock out my knees, I'm arched, and I push my hips back, I am now running out of room and everything's in my low back. But if I soften up my knees, you can kind of see how my pelvis comes under my rib cage, and then when I go back, I'm feeling more butt rather than low back. I'm in a better position. So we'll teach that, right? And say, hey, you're gonna stand right on top. You kind of want the handle to be close to the ankle, not necessarily, I would say, in line with the ankle, a little bit in front of it, right? Somewhere between, I would say, that big toe and the ankle, okay? I'm gonna be out shoulder width apart, and from there, I'm gonna soften up my knees, and then I'm gonna chop my hips, and think about closing the car door with my butt, right? Imagine I got groceries, I'm gonna close the car door with my butt. But I do want to see the logo on the chest, right? This is not an RDL. So here you can't see the logo on my chest. Here you can see the logo on my chest, right? And now I'm in my hips. From the side, my hip should be above my knee, my shoulder should be above my hip, right? So this RDL, shoulder, hip, same height, right? If I drop and I'm going here, knee and hip are in the same place, this is now a squat, right? So that's a good visual for the coach. He might not say it, but that's a good visual for the coach. So again, soft knee, close the car door with your butt, or touch the wall with your butt. See the logo on my chest. And then when I have a kettlebell, I'm gonna tell people to try to rip it apart. Now, when they do that, their abs are gonna engage and their lats are gonna engage. So again, that's one cue that could work well. Rip it apart. You can see what happens, right? When I try to rip it apart, my lats come down, my abs engaged, okay? So I'm gonna rip this apart and then brace for a punch. So pretend like Mike Tyson's gonna punch you in the stomach, and I'm gonna push the ground away, okay? So think about, instead of thinking pull, because you're gonna pull with your back, I'm gonna think push, right? Like a leg press. And at the top, I'm also, remember, there's a lot of cues that I'm sharing with you guys. You would not say all of these cues at the same time, okay? You would teach the sequence that I'm teaching. I'll show you guys at the end how I do it in class. And then you're looking, right? Kind of like a checklist, right? A checklist manifesto. Don't try to cue too much, one cue at a time when somebody's doing an exercise, right? So if somebody's got that forward head posture, I'm gonna say, hey, pretend like I'm measuring you. Try to get as tall as you possibly can. Measuring tool, right? Or there's a string on the crown of your head, and it's getting pulled to the ceiling, right? Boom, so now they have that posture from the get-go. Soft knees, close the card over your butt, see the logo on your chest, think like you're getting measured, rip the bell apart, push. Okay, and again, at the top, I'm tall. At the bottom, my eyes are 3 feet in front of me. At the top, I'm looking straight. Right, and you'll see some folks that kind of crunch over here. I'll tell them to have the clavicles run away from each other. Right, and remember, visual helps a lot. If I'm like, hey, you're here right now, I want you to do this. Right, proud chest, pump handle up, right? Again, I said a lot of cues. The key is to demonstrating this in class. So if I was doing a class, I'd go, all right, guys, make sure you're tall. Think like somebody's measuring you, okay? Soft knees, chop your hips. We're gonna close the car door with our butt. We're gonna rip that bell apart. I wanna see the logo on your chest, brace for a punch. And now I'm gonna get tall, eyes 3 feet in front of me, push and get tall, right? I'm gonna demo that. Once we start going, I'm watching a person do it. I might give them 1 or 2 cues. I'm actually probably gonna watch them for a couple reps and then give them 1 or 2 cues. Not all the cues at once, all right? That's gonna confuse them. If you confuse, you lose, okay? And by the way, like a lot of this stuff, if it was a double kettlebell deadlift, very similar. We just buy the wider, we keep them on the outsides, right? Very, very similar cues. If I was doing a trap bar deadlift, I mean, it wouldn't be much different, right? So that hinge position, but if we're gonna do RDL, which is top down, and let's just say we're doing it with the kettlebell, right? Same thing, soft knees, but now I'm gonna keep the butt higher. Tension your hamstrings, right? So same thing, we're staying tall, ripping the bell apart, soft knees, but back, 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 right? Let it hover above the ground. But now I'm feeling my hamstrings, I'm pushing the ground away, and you do not see the logo on my chest, but I'm still pushing up, getting tall, right? So that's our kind of 2 main hinge movements. Those are the coaching cues. And refer to the previous video on the coaching skills about not coaching too much at the same time. Correct 1 to 2 things at most. Let them do it right, let them self-correct, and then go from there. And now, again, when we look at group stuff, we're goblet squatting a hell of a lot. And double kettlebell squatting, which is gonna be very similar. But many of the things I'm gonna talk about are similar to if we're doing a front squat, double kettlebell squat, sandbag squat, goblet squat. You know, if we go to safety bar squat, similar. We go to back squat, I'm gonna coach some things differently. Box squat, we're gonna coach some things differently, right? And I may even add a box squat here because we do it a decent amount as well in groups. But let's just look at it without the weight at all. You'll see me on a wedge. Should you be doing a wedge? It depends. To be honest with you, most beginner folks will do much better on a wedge because they have tight hips and they have tight ankles, right? And this just allows them to be more upright, right? We always say, hey, I want the squat to be squatty, right? So a hinge is hingy, but I want the squat to be as squatty as possible, right? I want to be as upright as possible. So when I'm doing this, the wedge allows me to get more of knee forward, butt down, and stay as upright as possible, right? Instead of being here in my hips. So that's why we tend to use it quite a lot in classes. If people have good range of motion, good ankle mobility, good hip mobility, hey, you don't have to do it, or you can lower that wedge as well, right? But in general, when you look at me from the side, before I even grab the bell, you're gonna hear that again, that soft knees, right? A lot of folks will see they start the movement with arching their back, boom, they're in their low back, right? Versus knees forward and then butt down, right? So again, I always talk about when you're doing a deadlift, you're trying to get your hip from point A to point B, right? Back. When we're going squat, we want to get our hip from point A to point B, down, right? With as little shift back as possible. And again, that's what the wedge allows us to do. And one cue that's been very helpful for me is just having people, you know, giving them, try to get to my hand with your knees because it makes them drive the knees forward. And I say, hey, imagine there's 2 strings pulling your knees forward and there's 1 string pulling your butt down to the ground. So now we're gonna go knees forward, butt down, okay? So that's a very helpful cue. When I grab the kettlebell, and again, I wanna make sure the elbows are not here because they're gonna get fatigued, is crush like the elbows go down. So I'm holding it basically with my forearms. And then you got a nice cue of saying, hey, stay upright. Again, that tall posture. Somebody's measuring you, soft knees. Get the elbows on the insides of the knees, right? So pull yourself down. And even if they, again, like depending on their levers, right, they're shooting for the elbows insides of the knees and then driving back up. Again, depending on their mobility, range of motion, maybe they can only get to here. That's okay, right? And then they're pushing the ground away. Now, what should the stance be? Simple solution is this. Test it out. For most folks, it's gonna be about hip width apart, 5 to 12 degrees of toes out. But everybody has different anatomy, right? So I always tell people, even in warm-ups, hey, try a squat. If you go pretty close, how does that feel? It's a little tight. Go a little bit wider. All right, for me, that feels great, right? If I went even wider, I get kind of stuck. And you'll see folks that are close, they feel the best. Some that most people will feel great right about here, right? You'll see some people like my girl, she has very retroverted hips. Like this is a great squat for her. She gets the lowest when she's really wide, right? So that's gonna be the right squat for you to find your stance. But with that said, if somebody's leaning over, I also give them the wall analogy, and I'll even stand in front of them. Meaning, let's say that they're doing this, right? And they're leaning over into that squat. I'm gonna stand here or give them a dowel and put it right in front of them. Say, hey, don't hit the dowel. So now soft knees, and then they're gonna try to stay more upright. Now they got more of a squatty squat. Push the ground away, all right? So pull yourself down, push the ground away, right? And that's really like the main cues that we're using, because if they do things like get tall, crush the bell, soft knees, put the butt down, a lot of other things will, I'll say, come into play. But remember, if it doesn't look right, it doesn't fly right, right? And that means that if something's looking off, we gotta make a correction to make it look better. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be safe, and it has to look better, okay? So that is our goblet squat coaching and cueing. All right, so push-up. Obviously, everybody can do the push-up, like so basic. But here's the thing, coaching a great push-up and doing a great push-up, all of a sudden becomes challenging. And we wanna set high standards in all of our classes. We do a lot of push-ups. And we kind of start with like where the hands are. Now, if you're asking regression, progression, I'll show you that. We will, if we have a lot of people on the turf, we will regress to the knees. But ideally in a small group setting or a semi-private setting, rather, my regression would be putting a barbell on a rig and then bringing it up to where the person can do quality form with hips and shoulders together, right? And core working. And we're just gonna keep bringing that down as time goes by, as it gets stronger. But for the turf, again, we got a big group, we're gonna do it this way. So first, I'm gonna talk about palm position, right? You'll see that most people set up push-ups, they'll have kind of like this, squeeze together fingers with space behind the pointy finger. I'm gonna say, hey, look, I want you to splay your fingers, right? Use the floor to splay your fingers. Every knuckle should be pushing in the ground, because again, most of the time you're gonna see that kind of rolling to the outside. So I wanna push that pointy finger into the ground. I wanna be about shoulder width or a little bit wider apart, and the knuckles are gonna be right over the shoulders. If I draw a line, my knuckles should hit the shoulder, right? So I don't wanna be behind or I don't wanna be over either, right? From there, I'm gonna step back, right? And I like the setup here. So I'm gonna go step back, boom. Again, I wanna make sure that my hips and shoulders are in the same line, that same cue as somebody's measuring me, right? I'm getting taller, somebody's pulling a string on the top of my head, and then I'm going to roll myself down. So pull myself down, and my hips and shoulders are moving at the same time, right? So I'm pulling down, every knuckle's pushing into the ground, I'm still nice and tall, and then pushing the ground away. And at the top, I wanna push. This is called hanging on my lats. Push the ground away, okay? Pull myself down, push the ground away, okay? If you watch it from the side, just to get those angles, splay the fingers, knuckles over shoulders, a little wider than shoulder width apart, step back. You can even think about like, hey, if somebody was gonna kick you in the stomach right now, what would you do? You'd get a little bit of a brace, and I'd say, hey, get tall. Pull down. Notice hips and shoulders same height. Push away. Making sure you do not reach with the neck, like pigeon, right? And one of the things that I'll give a coaching cue to is if people are doing that, I'll put my hand on the back of their head and say, push into my hand. So now they're driving back and getting that double chin, right? And all of a sudden it's like, whoa, my abs are working more. This is way harder. When we look at the elbow position, it's the same as I teach in the bench. If this is a T, we don't want a T. We don't want an I. We want a W or an arrow. Like if you look at that, kind of look at the arrow position, right? So going down into the arrow, for most people, the shoulders will feel the best in that position. And if I'm gonna go regress, all I'm gonna do is everything I was just doing, right? Knuckles over shoulders. I'm gonna go down and everything else stays the same. I'm tall, right? Abs are engaged, meaning like somebody's gonna kick me in the stomach. Oh shit, brace, pull myself down, hips and shoulders together, push up, shoulder blades, make this gap disappear. Again, I don't wanna be here. I wanna be driving away, right? So you might get a little bit of that rounding, but we're training those serratus muscles and that shoulder blade to function in a healthy way. If we have to go on a barbell, like we said, now again, my wrist mobility is not an issue because I can just wrap my hands around, keep a straight wrist, and then everything else stays the same. That barbell will probably hit right below my sternum. Because again, if we're doing small group, we're putting people on barbells, right? If it's in a large group setting, team training, people are gonna be doing push-ups here, right? And a lot of times what we'll do is put a yoga block to where a person can get that range of motion, tap the yoga block for range, and then come back up, right? And usually when we get those cues down, you'll see a quality push-up. And again, if we have to regress it, I'll just have people hold positions, right? Hold halfway down, hold the top, and we're gonna kind of break the push-up down until it looks good. We want a good standard, right? Looks right, it flies right. So that's our coaching and cueing for the push-up. All right, so I'm gonna show you TRX row. And part of the reason for the TRX row is because, again, we use them a lot. We use inverted rows. I'm gonna show you like a one-arm dumbbell row with an imaginary weight, like what we'd coach to. Again, there's a lot of exercises to go over, but these main movement patterns, I really like to lock them down, especially for what we're doing in groups. All right, so on a TRX row, I always say like, you're in a reverse plank. And one of the things that, when I talk about specific individual cues, a general cue that you've heard me say in every single exercise I've shown is, imagine somebody's measuring you, imagine somebody's pulling you by a string, right? So I'm getting tall. So I don't have this kind of collapsed, right? Like again, the world is sitting on me, the world is like pushing me down. It's the exact opposite, right? Like get tall, proud chest without arching that low back. And same thing with the TRX rows, right? Remember, we're doing the opposite of a push-up. If a push-up was here, we are now rowing in this same position. Not too close, right? Because shoulders will roll for most folks. I'm gonna reach with my chest to that bar, right? So again, depending on the fitness level of the person, where their feet are gonna be, most of the time we'll go like at a 35-degree angle here. You can go neutral, that's okay, right? Just depends on what you want here. And most people's hips will like lag. You can kind of see my hips below. And the way I fix that is I ask for permission, say, hey, can I push your hips with my hands? Say yes, and then I'll literally push that hip. So I'm gonna like push against my hands, so that way they drive in, and now they get nice and tall. So I'm driving in, and now it's like, whoa, okay, I'm feeling my abs here, I'm feeling my glutes here, right? And then, okay, I'm gonna measure you. So if I measured you to get as tall as possible, what would you do? Perfect. I want you to keep that position, and I want you to drive your elbows and try to elbow me behind you. If somebody's behind you, elbow them. Boom, now they drive back, right? So yep, keep that chest, so reach with your chest to the bar. I don't want you to see collapse. Reach with the chest to the bar. Remember, be visual when you're showing these things, right? And then drive the elbows behind you, pause, squeeze the shoulder blades, and then reach. Right, so I'm reaching here, so I don't stop short. Reach, chest is always tall, hips are through, nice and tall, head is tall. So I'm a moving plank. Right, in most situations, we want that scap to move through that full range of motion, but we do not want the shoulders to roll down, right? So that's why we teach keeping that. This is also the sternum, the pump handle. And again, we gotta visually show this to people so they understand what we're saying. Hey, if this is your pump handle up. You can see the H in my chest. I want the H facing up. Not arching my low back, just the H on the chest facing up. Hey, do you feel your upper back? Yes, I do. Okay, great. H faces up. Now let's get measured and tall. Brace your abs for Mike Tyson punch, right? Push your hips through. And now we're moving, and only the arms are moving, nothing else, right? But we're moving through that full range of motion. So that'll be our TRX row. Now, you might go, like, I'm just gonna show you a quickie here, because if we're doing a one-arm dumbbell row, a lot of this portion stays the same, right? I would make sure that I'm not collapsed, so I'm gonna push that bench away, okay? I got the dumbbell right here. I'm gonna let the shoulder blade go a little bit. I'm still feeling my lat, I'm gonna let it go. And then I'm gonna pull the shoulder blade back and elbow into the pocket, right? Again, this is one move, but sometimes we'll sequence it. I'll say shoulder blade into the pocket. So I'll say shoulder blade into the socket, elbow into the pocket. Nice rhyme as well, right? So socket, pocket. But then it starts looking like one movement, okay? And again, I'm still not trying to reach with my pigeon neck, right? I'm thinking tall, I'm pushing this away, I'm reaching, and I'm driving. Now, there's a lot of, cable row, same thing, right? And we could say, what if we're trying to, work the lats a little bit more, but then we start coaching a little bit differently, and that's okay. These are our baseline movements. So TRX row, one arm row, and some of that rowing variation movements, this is how we coach them. All right, so the baseline is for a lunge is a static lunge. And I'm gonna show you front side, and I'm gonna show side to side. But I like to use the lines because we'll kind of go from, okay, if we do a static lunge, then there's a reverse lunge, there's a forward lunge. Kind of the baseline things are similar. So the reason why we use lines on the mats here is that I can say, hey, you're gonna be about a half a foot away from the line on one side, a half a foot away from the line on the other side, right? So imagine railroad tracks, right? If my hips have kind of like beams coming out, it'll be railroad tracks. It won't be tightrope, because you can see I lose my balance. Right, so, and then I'm going to be, remember, we might put a pad underneath in about a 90-90 position, right? So 90 here, staying tall. That's our baseline, right? And from here, again, we wanna make sure you feel your whole foot, that your knee is straight down, right? So it's not out like this, it's straight down. And then from there, driving up, okay? So again, point the knee down, I'm getting measured, I'm going straight down, right? And if you look at that from the side, yes, it's probably, I'm staying on this line. It's probably a little bit more, again, quad dominant here, right? Straight down, use the lines. It's okay if you got a little bit of shin angle here, that's fine, right? And then again, I'm measuring myself, I'm driving down, I'm controlling myself down and punching back up. If people don't have the strength or control, we get them close to a rig, right? We can use TRXs. Again, we can use stability for that. But when we move from, because then if we add a goblet squat, we add dumbbells, right? Again, we're just loading that same pattern. But on a reverse lunge, we're still keeping that railroad track analogy, right? I'm going to step back in that same railroad track position. Now, if I want it to be more glute dominant, right? We will get a little bit more of a shin angle and a lean, right? So I'm more athletic. You can kind of see like, I'm more in that accelerated position. I'm getting more butt cheeks. I get a positive shin angle, right? So we can change those things, but we want to make sure we have the railroad tracks. We're thinking tall, because even if I'm getting that lean, I'm still thinking tall, right? I still got that tall spine. And you want to look at knee stuff, right? And I mentioned a little bit of it. So if folks are stepping out because they're tight, right? And you can kind of see this. Point the knee down. And of course, don't be afraid to ask for permission, but telling, like, again, giving people cues when they're going here and saying, okay, like, I want you to pause here, right? And then now it's like, okay, go down. Whoa. And they may not be able to go full range of motion, that's okay, but at least we now have that alignment. Same thing if you see that hip popping out. Now, one of the ways to solve that without a lot of coaching cues is to give them a weight on this side. So I'm just gonna load this side, whoop, and it's gonna bring them back in, right? Because it's gonna shift the hip here. And now, if they're not strong enough to do a static lunge, we can go into the isometric position and just do a hold, which is a regression for almost everything, right, that we can do for any of these movement patterns, okay? So again, we wanna also look at the knee collapse. If somebody does have a knee collapse, sometimes it's just giving them a cue, like they're here, it's like, hey, I want you to push against my hand, and now I want you to go down, right? So now they're pushing out. The second way to do it is to attach a band that pulls them in the same direction as their collapse. This is called RNT, reactive neuromuscular training, right? Their brain is gonna go like, whoa, I'm getting pulled this way. Let me resist that. So it's gonna resist it, and now we're gonna work that glute med. It's gonna put them into a better position, right? Now, these are things that are probably gonna be done more in a setting of small group, semi-private, where if you have a large group, it's a little bit harder to do. So you want to show people progressions, regressions. Again, it might be like, hey, you see somebody and they can't do that, and you go like, I want you to grab onto the rig, and from the rig, hey, I just want you to go full range of motion, or like if you can't do that, we're just gonna hold that position, right? Because that's a baseline thing. And remember that the position of the hip is gonna be, I say, determined by the position of the foot. So we're always talking about feel the whole foot. Big toe, little toe, heel. It's like a triangle, tripod foot, right? Outline the whole foot. So if people are rolling to the outside, we'll say, hey, push through the inside. Imagine there's a $100 bill here, push through the inside, okay? And we're just always looking at that manifesto, the checklist manifesto. Does it look, if it looks right, it flies right. How is it supposed to look? Now, there are practice and reps that you have to do, but again, these are just 5 of our baseline movement patterns that you can take the coaching cues, implement them into your own training with your team, and we're gonna keep doing episodes like this to kind of break down more and more movements. Overhead pressing, overhead pulling, side lunges, all of those. Again, we're gonna keep kind of building up a library of these different movements and coaching cues. So make sure you implement these, and for more tips like this, make sure to subscribe to this channel.